2000 Sonic was unique?
The 2000s. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the 2000s? Was it the likes of denim jeans, the Nokia brick, cargo pants, Napster, the Game Boy Advance, really extravagant haircuts, or Sonic the Hedgehog? No, just me. The 2000s for Sonic the Hedgehog was a very interesting decade for certain, let me tell you that for free. The games and other media that came out during this period were equally as iconic as they were damaging. Don't you worry, more on that later. But what is for certain is Sega and Sonic Team had a lot of challenges they had to overcome. And with the rapid advancement of technology, Sega and Sonic Team had to make sure they were keeping up. Their rivals, Nintendo, had it pretty much nailed down to a T. Whereas it was quite clear in this decade at times, Sega and Sonic Team really struggled. But in an industry as brutal as the gaming industry, they had no choice but to try. The 2000s weren't just the full transition into 3D, but this decade also brought along the infamous Dark Age, a period where Sonic's popularity was at the lowest of the low, and would almost take roughly about 20 years to recover. For better or for worse, the 2000s were a very instrumental part of the franchise, especially for people around my age when they were growing up, because Sonic in the 2000s was the Sonic that we knew and loved. With all that being said, guys, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy as we dive into Sonic's most decisive, divisive, and most pivotal decade yet. A decade centered around gimmicks and different ideas, games that try and reinvent the wheel, and just overall chaos behind the scenes at times. It's time to go back in time to the 2000s.
Yeah.
After the major success that was Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic Team and Sega knew that they had some pretty big boots to fill. Expectations for the next game were in the stratosphere, and Sonic's first major release of the new millennium was none other than Sonic Adventure 2. Now, I know nowadays this game divides opinions, but it is still regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Sonic game of all time. And Sonic Adventure 2 took a much more serious approach to storytelling, while also still having that Sonic nature about it. And Sonic Adventure 2 would set the foundations of the coming years. A majority of the games that came after this tried to focus on more robust and serious storytelling.
I come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog's a bitch-ass motherfucker.
Yeah, you had games like Sonic Heroes that were a bit more lighthearted in nature, but you'd have games like Shadow the Hedgehog come out, Sonic 06, Sonic Unleashed, the likes of, all of which more leaning into the serious side of storytelling, exploring certain themes and building characters, and even introducing a few. Let's not forget, Sonic Adventure 2 introduced Shadow the Hedgehog, one of the series' most popular characters. And once again, after the success of Sonic Adventure 2, expectations were even higher. To which, while that's fantastic and all, I do think that contributed partially towards the Sonic's downfall in the 2000s, because people were expecting more and more with each release. And while many of us Sonic fans are quite fond of the 2000s, for better or worse, I think we can all recognise how critically damaging this was for the franchise. In the 2000s, if you said you was a Sonic kid, you'd get laughed at. At least I did. Anytime I'd say that I'm a Sonic fan, I'd get asked why I play those games. I'd get told that they were really bad. And yeah, to some degree, those people had a point. But there was just something about those games that just kept me coming back. Whether it was the storytelling, or the vast array of characters, or the charm, I just loved this era of Sonic. Now, these games did have a knack for experimentation, and I mean a lot. No one release was ever the same. Sonic Heroes had the whole teamwork gimmick, being able to play as 3 characters simultaneously and switch between them on the fly, and designing the stages around that core mechanic. Shadow the Hedgehog had... yeah, Sonic 06 toyed with the idea of time travel. Now, I do have certain opinions about including time travel in things, but I know for some people they do like it. Sonic and the Secret Rings, it was all about the Arabian Nights. Unleashed, the Werehog, etc, etc. All these games had some kind of unique gimmick about them, and I think a lot of the time, Sega and Sonic Team purely designed these games around said gimmicks. And in some cases it worked, in other cases it didn't. And it wasn't just games. Some of you might have heard of a popular anime called Sonic X. Chris Thorndike is a little bit. Sonic X was extremely popular, to the point where they practically did an entire recast. Ryan Drummond? He's old news. Let's get Jason Griffiths in. Listen, I like Jason, but this whole situation was kind of messy. You had 2 different Sonic voice actors at the time, and while that is technically true today, with Roger Craig Smith and Ben Schwartz, Sega and Sonic Team just decided to wake up and choose violence and just completely kick the current cast in the games out of the door. But I mean, Ryan Drummond has even gone on to say that he wasn't expecting Sonic Heroes to be his last piece of work, but they found out last minute that it was going to be. Which is kind of a shame, because Sonic Heroes was his best work as Sonic. And even though Jason is my favourite Sonic, God, I wish Ryan Drummond had a little bit more time as Sonic. Maybe another game or two, but Sega said no. And listen, I kind of understand why, but just because I understand doesn't necessarily mean that I agree. And ironically enough, it wouldn't even be the only time that this would happen. The 4Kids cast kind of got the same treatment, hence why we've got Roger Craig Smith now. And that's another thing. Between 2001 and 2010, we've technically had 3 different Sonic voice actors for the games. Obviously the third being Roger Craig Smith, and he's the current one. And regardless of my opinions on Roger Craig Smith as Sonic, I don't think he's bad, but he's not my favourite. I'm just kind of glad we have a little bit of consistency now. I mean, the guy's been voicing him for 16 years, for goodness sake. Yeah, I bet that made you all feel old. Because it sure as hell did with me, Harduck. But it is nice to see that they're not changing voice actors every 2 seconds now. However, with all that aside, as much as I love and appreciate this era of Sonic games, we've got to talk about the good,
yeah,
the
I
bad,
like how
and
they
the
haven't
ugly.
changed.
And no, I don't mean the
voice
film that
actors
Clint
in a
Eastwood was in.
while,
Now we're digging into the meat and gravy of this whole era. The 2000s to me had a
It's just
certain
like Sonic's
aura about it that I
character's
just
getting more
absolutely
defined.
love. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but the 2000s certainly had a charm that I think the current games just cannot seem to match. It gave off a vibe that was absolutely unique. Whether it was the cheesiness and the fact that it tried to take itself so seriously at times, or maybe the fact that it tried to toy with so many different gimmicks in so little time. I don't know, man, I just absolutely loved it. As mentioned before, the games in the 2000s tried to take a more serious look at the storytelling, which some people like
Yeah,
and others
Sonic
don't.
fucking
Personally,
dies.
I'm in the camp of I really like it. Yeah, the more serious storytelling isn't always a home run, but for the most part, I do really like it. Now, I'm not saying that every single game in the franchise should include a child getting absolutely clattered. However, exploring more serious themes to me has never been a bad thing. For example, I don't think Shadow would be anywhere near as popular as he is without the trauma that he suffered, because people love characters with traumatic backstories, apparently. Which I completely get, because it makes people feel empathy and sympathy for these characters. It makes you want to see them do well and be the best versions of themselves that they can despite their past. This kind of storytelling just was not really that present in the 2010s. I'll die on this hill. You go from games like Sonic Adventure 2 that deal with themes like trauma, grief, loss, and insanity, to games like Sonic Forces that deal with the power of friendship. Now, I don't think it even needs to
the
be
power
said
of
which one is
friendship.
better out of those two, in my opinion.
That's
The
my
more
favorite
serious and
power.
mature storytelling was good, damn it, and I won't have anybody tell me otherwise. I mean, you can if you want, it's your opinion. Storytelling aside, for better or worse, the gimmicks that these games came up with were quite creative. I kind of low-key love the fact that no 2 games were ever the same. And yeah, I know you can say that for pretty much every Sonic game in existence, but dude, this was like the Wild West. Like, how can you go from a game like Sonic and the Secret Rings to Sonic Unleashed in the space of a year? They're so radically different, it's insane.
are
Oh
so
hell,
different.
even a game like Sonic Heroes to Shadow 05. Like, it was absolutely nuts. And yeah, I know people looked at Sonic games of this era and thought, not another Sonic game. But I'm not kidding, I absolutely love the fact that they were all radically different. Because my main complaint of games nowadays, and this isn't just Sonic games, it's the fact that games nowadays just feel like they have zero personality. These games oozed with personality. And yeah, sometimes they didn't quite stick the landing, but they stood out. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave that up to you. But me personally, I was a fan. And what I found recently is that these games kind of remind me of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Now, I know that is a completely left field comparison, but hear me out. When the Star Wars prequel trilogy came out, those movies were hated. And I think the same can be said for quite a few of the games in the 2000s for Sonic. Think about it this way. Other than Sonic fans, nobody looked at the Blue Hedgehog fondly in the 2000s. I mean, nobody. His reputation was completely in the mud. But nowadays, I'm hearing more people come out and defend games like Sonic Unleashed, Shadow 05, Sonic the Hedgehog, as in the one from 2006, obviously. Hell, even Sonic Heroes has its own super fan. But
feel
way
like
back in the
people appreciate
2000s,
games
this
more
kind
the
of
older
praise
they
was
are.
unheard of. At least to this degree, anyway. Now, some people might call it nostalgia. I don't fully buy into that. Yes, for a lot of us, it is. Reminds us of a better time, I guess. But there are also a lot of people playing these games for the first time. And it does get to a point where a lot of these people are saying that these games are overglazed now. Unleashed is the latest victim of that. Trust me, those words would never have been uttered in 2008. However, this era of Sonic was not without its problems, and we're about to get into those. Listen, even though I said I liked the idea behind the gimmicks, and that, again, no one game was ever the same, as a result, the series suffered a major identity crisis. And that's putting it mildly. It felt like at times Sonic Team and Sega were scrambling scrambling to save the franchise's dwindling popularity. And instead of taking their time and crafting a great game, we were getting a lot of these games thick and fast. And a lot of them, rightfully so, got criticised, because more often than not, they were buggy and felt unfinished at times. And then we got to 2006, a game that almost flat out killed the entire franchise for good. It is genuinely a miracle how the franchise is still even a thing after what was the disaster class of Sonic 06. Not only did it get absolutely bodied by critics, but even the fans were saying that they were walking away from the franchise because of this game alone. This game finally broke the patience of Sonic fans. And listen, I know everybody likes to talk about Sonic 06, saying if they did this, or if they did that, or if they had more time, etc, etc. If my auntie had a dick, she would be my uncle. Listen, I understand that the development cycle for Sonic 06 was an absolute disaster. I understand that, I completely get it. But at the end of the day, it was still buggy, unfinished, and just practically unplayable at times. And listen, if you like Sonic 06, that's absolutely fine. I know there's plenty of people here who watch my videos who do like Sonic 06, and I'm not gonna judge you for that. That is absolutely fine. But sometimes, guys, we need to call a spade a spade. My favourite game is Sonic Unleashed. Yes, I know, guys, I've never, ever, ever mentioned that before, but even I can recognise plenty of the things it got wrong. It doesn't stop me from loving it, though. Even though I look back on the 2000s for Sonic quite fondly, there is no mistake in my mind that this was a very, very rough period for Sonic, and it took Sonic Team and Sega a hell of a long time to put this franchise back on track. The 2000s for Sonic was a very, very interesting time. It was a decade of rapid change and transition, and some of these problems that they faced were kind of expected in the end. Think about it this way, in the 90s, Sega was an absolute powerhouse. I mean, they had their own consoles, for goodness sake. But they had the transition of not only having to develop their games in 3D, but to develop their games for multiple systems. And yeah, at times, the struggles showed. You can tell that multi-platform at times was not their forte. Were the 2000s flawed? Absolutely. Did we get some pretty horrific games in this period? Absolutely. But did we get some memorable moments with the storytelling and the games? And did we actually get some games here that actually stood out as some of the series' best? In my opinion, abso-bloody-lutely. Call it nostalgia all you want. The 2000s was my favourite decade for the Blue Blur. Even if some of the games kinda sucked, I couldn't help but love pretty much all of them, bar one or two of course. Yeah, a good portion of the games definitely suffered from a little bit of jank, but that was kind of their charm. And like I said earlier on in this video, these games absolutely oozed with personality, and I can't help but love that. Now, I'm not saying the current Sonic games are bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I just can't help but love the games from the 2000s more than what we're getting now. And listen, I love current Sonic. I love the place that Sonic is currently in. But if you gave me a copy of Sonic Heroes or Sonic Frontiers, I'm not gonna lie guys, I'm picking Heroes. Honestly, I think the 2000s did so many things right, but obviously that's not to say they didn't have their struggles and their drawbacks. And at the end of the day, the 2000s era Sonic is a huge reason as to why I fell in love with this series in the first place. So at the very least, I have that decade to thank for that. Still to this day, I boot up my emulators and I play the older stuff and I love it. And yeah, sure, while this decade technically was quite damaging on the franchise, if you think about it, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because Sonic as a franchise has never been in such a strong place. This franchise is more popular than ever. And yeah, at the time, while it was upsetting to see the absolute massacring Sonic was receiving during the 2000s, I think just like with any franchise that suffers a rough patch, I think it unfortunately needs to happen before any franchise can realise just how good they can truly be. I know in some super rare circumstances, some franchises are just perfect from the get-go, but a majority of mainstream franchises all have their rough periods. Some of the biggest franchises in the world are currently in them, but that's not to say they won't find their way again. And fortunately for us, the Blue Blur certainly did. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I genuinely wanted an excuse to talk about my favourite period of Sonic. And listen, I know some people will still hold the opinion that this era was trash, but you know what they say, it may be trash, but it's our trash, damn it. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time.